Happy Easter, Southminster. It's good to see you. Recently, my sisters have been sending me all these pictures of resurrection rolls. Now, I don't know if you know what these are. I had never heard of them, or if I had, it had been a while. These are rolls with marshmallows in the middle of them that expand and burst out of the roll as they cook. The idea is it's just like Jesus bursting from the empty tomb. We didn't make any this year, but as I've thought about Jesus bursting from the tomb, I've gotten stuck on Jesus' first words following his resurrection, or at least some of them. In Matthew, when Jesus appears to the Marys, he says, "Do not be afraid." In Luke and John, when Jesus appears to the disciples, he says, "Peace be with you." Now, when Jesus says these things, he isn't just saying, "It's okay, don't be afraid." Jesus is saying, you never have to be afraid again. That's no small revelation. Because on the one hand, Jesus isn't saying all your troubles are going to magically disappear and life will be easy because I'm alive. But on the other hand, Jesus is saying, because I am alive, I will always be alive, and therefore I will always be with you. So that therefore you have nothing to fear because I am with you. There's no trouble, no pandemic, nothing that will separate you from me and my love for you. So Jesus is saying death has lost its sting, and now so has fear. That's why I've been thinking about Jesus' words so much lately. I mean, none of us are strangers to fear. We've all struggled with fear. I mean, the disciples locked themselves in a room out of fear of being persecuted because they were followers of Jesus. We all know about COVID-19 right now and how that's filled us with fear, and how the world is telling us to lock our doors and stay home. And I'm hearing from a lot of people these days how scared they are and how these paralyzing effects of fear are just draining people's lives. And yet Jesus' words stand in such sharp contrast to the way we're living right now. Jesus is saying we don't have to live this way anymore. You and I don't have to be afraid anymore. We don't have to let fear paralyze or drain us anymore. I mean, all I can really say to that is wow. Because I don't know about you, but I need to hear that right now. I need to hear that things like COVID-19 or, whatever troubles I'm dealing with have nothing on Jesus. And that I don't need to be afraid. I have to admit, in some ways, this is terrifying in its own right. The idea of not having to be afraid, because it means that the spiritual and physical worlds are now one. But more than anything, though, being free from fear, I found, allows me to carry on each day with a deep joy and peace, no matter what the world throws at me. It's like this sense of being able to just be. It's this knowledge that God's peace is with me forever. And even more profound is that Jesus really isn't giving us a choice either. His words simply reinforce the reality of him standing there in front of the Marys and the disciples alive. Jesus is with us whether we want him to be or not. It's proof that we have been redeemed and reconciled to God. In some kind of funny way, Jesus is essentially telling us, this has happened. Get on board. And if we don't get on board, then our lives will be held in slavery by our fear. But if we do get on board, we will experience the peace of God that surpasses all understanding and guides our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus, just as Paul said. It's the exact kind of peace that we need today and every day. Now, what's most interesting is if we get on board with what God has done and is doing through Jesus, we're engaging in a whole new movement of life. As Walter Brueggemann says, we're engaging in an Easter movement of social disobedience. Think about that for a second. Easter is a reminder that we can't live in fear if we want to live in faith. And to live in faith is to live in contradiction to what the world tells us. To live in faith is to move forward into the unknown, knowing that God will see you through it. To live in faith is to understand that God's life-giving message is for others as much as it is for you. Others who need to hear, don't be afraid, and peace be with you, as much as we did. You see, by saying to us, Don't be afraid. Peace be with you. Jesus is calling us to life in the midst of fear and despair. We just have to accept his summons to life and not be afraid. If it helps, remember, life will always outlast death. So don't let your fear, wherever it comes from, wherever it is, enslave you. Don't be afraid. And may God's peace be with you forever. Have a great and blessed week.